By the way, now that, let me back up. Justin got us fixed where we're now live on the website again. So if you're looking for it, go to the website. Facebook was real choppy. It just was not. Yeah, it just was not good. And so Justin finally got it fixed to where we're back on the website, and it's smooth. So if you want to watch any of the previous messages, if you're out or anything like that, then go to the website. Don't go to my Facebook. 11. Yeah, it was bad. I tried to watch John, and I couldn't. Because it would start and stop. And then you sit there and wait a couple of minutes, and then it would start and then stop. So if it turns out that we can't go to the website again or to YouTube again, then we're just not going to do it. That it was horrible. And so, website. Do you guys remember how to log in onto the website? If you need the password, you need to let me know so that I can text that to you, because it's password protected. Okay, you need to let me know later. Remember, we were just talking about my wife and I couldn't remember. Okay. Matter of fact, shoot me a text and I will shoot you a text. Okay. Yes. Yeah. There's and a lot of storage. So we would get rid of the storage unit. So there's another several $100s a month that we would be getting as income because we're not paying it out. And so, good point. All right, Hebrews chapter 11, verse number 17. Hebrews chapter 11, verse number 17. By faith, Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called. So we looked at that last week, that Isaac is the promised seed because the promise was given to the child of Abraham and Sarah, not just Abraham's children, but to Abraham and Sarah. And the only child that Abraham and Sarah had together was Isaac. And so verse number, Verse number 18 there, where it says, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called. That's what that's referring to. Isaac was the chosen one. Now the Middle East, this whole thing with Israel and the Arabs and all that, it's a dispute over this very thing. Abraham's eldest son is Ishmael. He is the father of all the Arabs. The Arabs think that the oldest son is the one that should have the promises. But God promised to the seed of Abraham and Sarah the promised land and all that comes with that, the seed being as the stars of the sky and the sand of the sea, and all of the inheritance and the blessings and all of that was through Isaac. But in verse number 17, by faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac. I want to look at that. And so if you would, turn with me to Genesis 22. Now stick a little piece of paper or one of your ribbons or something here in Hebrews chapter 11, because we are going to come back at the end. Maybe your highlighting pen or something like that. Just keep the place. Then go back to Genesis 22. We're going to spend the majority of time in Genesis 22, but we are coming back to Hebrews 11. Genesis chapter 2, verse number 1. Genesis 22, verse number 1. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, I am here. Here I am. I want to stop there for a second. That word tempt is not the same word like we would see in the New Testament where the devil tries to tempt us. Tempt to fall, tempt to sin, anything like that. You guys know I'm taking Hebrew. This is a verb, and this verb is intensive. It's an intensified verb. So do you know how you can intensify something? If I'm speaking to you in a voice like this, how can I intensify my voice? Hey! Did that get your attention? That's intensity. How about if we're emailing somebody? How can you intensify your email? Type it in all caps. You're yelling on the email. Don't do that. Yeah, don't do that unless you really want to yell. Learn how to type without all caps if you're just normal typing. But that's intensifying. Clapping. Okay? This is not intense. But if that's intense. Or if it's a loud one, that's intensity. This word tempt, the Hebrew word, is an intensive verb. And it literally means to put to the test. So where it says God did tempt, God did intensively put him to the test. Now, do you think asking somebody to sacrifice their firstborn child is an intensive test? So God told Abraham from the get-go that this was not going to be an easy one. He told him that I'm going to put you through a hard test. And as we read down through the rest of these verses, I want you to take notice how many times the word burnt offering is used. We'll pick up in verse 2. All right, so the Lord is now speaking to Abraham. Abraham has said, Here I am. God says, and he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering. All right, how many times when we think of this temptation of Abraham, do we think more about the knife than we do the type of offering? We'll get to the knife in a second. All right, take him to the land of Moriah and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, saddled his ass, and took two of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the what? Burnt offering. And rose up and went unto the place of which God had told him. Then on the third day Abraham lifted up his eyes, and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said to the young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the what? Burnt offering, and laid it upon Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold, the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. Did you guys notice how many times the burnt offering was mentioned? Did Abraham know what kind of sacrifice this was going to be? Yes, he prepared for it, didn't he? He brought the wood, he brought the fire, he brought Isaac. Did Isaac know what kind of sacrifice it was going to be? Yes. Because he said, here's the wood and the fire, but where's the sacrifice for the burnt offering? So both of them knew exactly what kind of offering this was going to be. Now, whole bunch of fun things going on here. Mount Moriah. Anybody familiar with Mount Moriah? Are you familiar with the term Calvary? That's the mount right outside Jerusalem. Golgotha. He rose up early in the morning. That's verse number 3. Then on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place far off. And Abraham said to his young man, Abide ye here, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship. And then what does it say right after that? Do you guys see that in verse number 5? What's the last 5 words in that verse? Verse number 5. All right, so I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again. Do you guys see that? So what was Abraham saying? I and the lad are going to go there. We're going to do the burnt offering of Isaac. And I and the lad are going to come back. Is there any question that Abraham and Isaac didn't know what kind of offering this was going to be? What do you do to a burnt offering? Kill it and burn it. If you go back to the Levitical law, to the law back in Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, I think some of it's even in Numbers. They would slice the throat, drain the blood. They would cut out the innards. Certain portions of the innards would go to God. They would burn it on the altar. And then the flesh was... Some of the flesh was given to the priests. But burn it up, burn it. They would take the ashes after they were done with the altar. They would take the ashes out and they would put it into a pail. What's left of a burnt offering? Help me out, help me out. Ashes? Abraham knew this was going to be an offering of his son Isaac, and it was going to be a burnt offering. Isaac knew that they were going, he didn't know he was the sacrifice, but they knew they were going to do a burnt offering. And what does Abraham say here at the end of verse number 5 again? And we will come back again. I and the lad are going to go worship, and we're coming back. Isn't that faith? What did Abraham faith in God that he was going to do? Raise him up from ashes. Verse number 9. And they came to the place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order for the burnt offering, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. Now, if this is a burnt offering, where are you going to lay the sacrifice? On the wood that he made Isaac carry. And the fire. Verse 10, and Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay the son. You know, that's most people fixate on the knife. What kind of sacrifice was this supposed to be? It was supposed to be a burnt offering. And a lot of people have this idea that Abraham took the knife and he was coming up on the son and he was about to do this. Well, that's not how you killed the lamb in the sacrifices. You just went up to it and slit its throat. So what was Abraham coming to do with the knife? He wasn't coming to plunge it into his heart. He was coming up to Isaac, who was laying down there, and he was going to lay the knife gently on his neck and then light the fire. That's what Abraham was coming to do. And he had faith that God was going to raise up the child, and he and the child were going to go back and meet the young men. Verse number 11. And the angel of the Lord called him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. Boy, wasn't that here am I? I mean, he's walking up to his son with the knife ready to go. I don't know if he got all the way down on him. Maybe he laid his arm on his chest and was going like this. I don't know if he'd gotten that far, but he was far enough that the Lord knew he was going to do it. Abraham said, Here am I. And he said, Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, to behold, behind him a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a... Does it sound like that he took Isaac off of the wood and put the ram on the wood and finished that sacrifice in the stead of his son? That's faith, isn't it? You know, when it says in Hebrews 11 and verse 17, by faith Abraham, look at the intensity of this trial. I mean, he made Abraham walk 3 days. By the way, how does that conversation go when Abraham comes back with Sarah? How does that conversation go? So, where'd you guys go? Well, we just went down to Mount Moriah. It was 3-4 days journey. What'd you guys do? Oh, well, we found a ram and we sacrificed it. Made a burnt offering of the ram on this mount over there. And Isaac is like, that may have really been plan A with the ram, but not as far as Isaac knew. I mean, and think about, Abraham didn't have to chase Isaac around to tie him up. Again, in verse number 9, and they came to the place where God told him of, and Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. He's like, Isaac, I need you to come here, and I need you to put your hands behind your back. All right, I'm gonna tie you up, okay? All right. All right, I got you tied up. Now I'm going to lay you on top of this wood. Well, what do you mean? No, I'm gonna lay you on top of the wood. God's going to take care of this. Don't worry about it. God's got this. Isaac was like, okay. Let Abraham lay him on the wood for a burnt sacrifice. And of course, I believe it was plan B, if you want to look at it that way. If you go back up to verse number 8. In verse number 7, Isaac saying, Behold the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb. So we see here Isaac is a type of Christ. It's an Old Testament type of Christ. Abraham had Isaac carry the wood. Jesus Christ carried his cross. He was going to be killed. Jesus was being led to be killed. It was in the same place. There are a lot of similarities. He was an only begotten son. He was the beloved son. There's so many similarities that many say that Isaac was a type of Christ. Just a picture of the coming Messiah. But if you read verse number 8 with different emphasis, listen how I read this. Abraham said, "My son, God will provide himself a lamb." What does that sound like? God's going to provide himself as the lamb. Did he not do that in Jesus Christ? God will provide himself a lamb. How is the Messiah described? The Lamb of God. By the way, wasn't it a ram that was caught in the thicket? Isn't that a male sheep? Was Messiah male or female? Verse number 14, and then we're going to jump back to Hebrews chapter 11. So you should still be in Genesis 22, verse number 14. Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh. As it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. Jehovah Jireh, literally translated, is the Lord will see. And the implication there is the Lord will see and provide. All right? In this case, the Lord provided himself a ram, did he not? So Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will see. And we see that written in the rest of the verse. In the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. It has that future tense, doesn't it? Future look. And so the Lord will and does see and will provide. Let's go back to Hebrews chapter 11 and let's look at verse 17 one more time. Are you there? Did you just flip back to the place that you were saving? Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 17, by faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son. What was the promise? He and the lad would come back. His son would be the seed. From Isaac, there are no other children. From Isaac, you're going to have the stars of the sky and the sand of the sea. Right? So there's the promises. Look at verse number 19. Accounting that God was able to raise him up. Raise him up from what? But from what specifically? Ashes, a burnt offering. Did Abraham know what kind of sacrifice this was going to be of his own son? Did Isaac know what kind of sacrifice this was going to be? He didn't know who it was, but did he know what kind it was going to be? It was a burnt offering. By faith Abraham, verse 17, accounting that God was able to raise him up from the ashes, even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. Boy, that's faith, is it not? Trusting that God's going to keep his promise. So much so that Abraham went through the motions to kill his first child, his only begotten son, the son of promise, knowing that God was going to raise him up. That's some kind of faith, isn't it? But you know what? Abraham is someone special. Abraham was a super spiritual guy before before God called him to come out of the tent, come out of his father's house. He was already super spiritual, wasn't he? And when he walked on the earth, every footstep was a booming thunder. Boom, boom, boom. Because it was Abraham that was walking. And we never read in the Old Testament where Abraham ever told a lie, did we? Where he said I think it was twice, that his wife was his sister. And kind of it was. He kind of omitted some things. But Abraham was still a super spiritual person where, well, of course Abraham had that kind of faith. Of course he did, because he's Abraham. Or was he just a regular guy that trusted God? All right, regular people. All right, regular people. Can you learn it? Can I learn it? Probably not me, but you guys could learn it. Can you learn that? By faith. What could be done? God's promises could be kept. Wait, let's talk about us. Do you think by faith, if we trusted God, that He could give us the building? Do you think He could give us more people? Can you learn that? When I say you, I mean can you learn that? Or are we thick of skull and let's see, some of the biblical words, brutish, simple. Men, we learned about that in Sunday school, didn't we? Simple-minded, feeble-minded. Let's not be that. Let's learn that by faith we can do the same thing and expect the same results that Abraham got. Again, he was just a guy that trusted God. And what can God do with someone that trusts Him? I forget which one it was. I want to say it was D.L. Moody. Or D.L. Moody heard it. What could God do with a man that was wholly given over to God? And D.L. Moody, big-time preacher, revivals all around him. And I forget exactly the time frame. I want to say the 1800s, 1900s. Revivals all around D.L. Moody. And at his deathbed, he said, the world still doesn't know what God could do with a man that was wholly given over to Him after all the things that D.L. Moody had done. What could he do if a room full of people just leaned in that direction? What if we just started walking a little bit by faith? What do you think he could do with a room full of people? Turn Tucson over? I'm sure he could. Can we learn it?